Hello, welcome back to How to Learn a Language. I recently had the chance to sit down with my friend Elfin, who runs just the most wonderful Italian retreats. If you're learning Italian, this is one to listen in on. And even if you're not, if you're curious about immersion and why it's never quite as simple as just move to Italy, get fluent, you're going to want to listen to this one because we talk all about intentional immersion, what that really means, what it looks like to do it very gently and kindly to yourself, even if you feel like you're more introverted, and the idea of needing to go out and just struggle and do the thing is kind of intense and a little scary. So we talk all about that. And I think you're going to love it. Elfin is just one of my favorite people to talk to. She's always she just has such a good energy. So yeah, I'm going to hand over to the interview now and I'll speak to you very soon. Bye. Enjoy. Elfin, hello.
Oh, how are you doing?
Good. I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good.
Lovely to be here after listening to so many episodes to not be listening, but actually be speaking on the podcast.
It's always a pleasure to speak with you. Like such a calming presence, and I feel that's going to be very relevant for what we're going to talk about later on as well. I really love your perspective on things, so I think this will be a fun conversation. And I want to talk about your retreats that you offer for Italian learners. But before we get there, I feel like it's useful for everyone, whatever language you're learning, to think about immersion in perhaps a slightly different way that we're used to. So I'm sure you've come across this as well. That general idea of, to really be fluent, you have to go to the country. You've got to be there. You've got to live there. You've got to move there. You've got to uproot your life and just go, right? How true is that in your opinion?
It's so not true, but I would also question why we say that. I mean, I often think that as well. Sometimes we think that, well, because we've been educated to think that that is the only way to truly learn a language, and that could have been true 20 years ago, for example. That not even true, but partially true 20 years ago when we didn't have everything that we have nowadays online. But sometimes what I notice some people do, not everybody, they think that they have to go to the country, immerse in the country, be there because they're looking for a shortcut. They want to wake up one day and that they're effortlessly speaking and understanding the language. And of course, it's not always true. And, it's a bit part of our language culture ideas, that you have to do things in a certain way. The practicality of that is really, it's completely different. I have a student. She's been remote working with her husband in Italy for the last 5 years. And she goes back to Canada in the summer to catch up with her work and stuff. But she spends most of the year in Italy. Her Italian is very good, but she feels the need to work with me because there are still things she's missing out on because her work life is in English. So she spends her day at a computer working in English. She doesn't know people in the community she's joined. She gets to know them slowly, but as adults, we befriend people in a different way from how we do it. As we grow up, befriending people becomes a bit more complicated. And so she needs me as a sort of cultural ambassador to explain the tiny things, work on all the language situations that she doesn't get an opportunity to live. And that is the most practical example that I can give. And that in her case, she's working, she's curious about the community she's in, which is great. But we're not all curious. Instinctively, we're not all, some of us are introverts. Some of us find it a bit hard to make that first step to connect with other people. We feel shy. So there's a whole linguistic areas that can remain completely untouched because How are you going to get in that situation? For example, a very practical example is that, still talking about this student of mine, she paid a girl to make meals for herself and her husband because they were working on some big projects. And only then did she find out that Italians don't only eat the dishes you find in restaurants, but there's so many dishes that we only make at home for each other, and we would never think about putting in a restaurant menu, that she found amazing. Small things like that, that add up though, and leave you with this feeling of you have like a curtain between you and the community you've joined. Take tiny little steps that seem insignificant, but add up, because
Mm.
it's the small stuff that gets you. It's not the big stuff is big, you know it, you see it coming, but it's the tiny details that will be making you feel, oh my God, I don't know this. This is a new world. So
Yeah. I mean, you said it's a long answer, but it's a great answer because it really touches on something I've noticed as well, that just going and existing in a place isn't enough. Immersion needs to be intentional. We need to have intentional immersion if you're going to make the most of your time there for language learning. Sometimes, you might be somewhere for a short period of time and have a community that you're already engaged with, whether it's from work or something like that. And that's that. And then you're going to be returning home, not a case of needing to actively get out of your comfort zone and find meetups or whatever. But yeah, there needs to be some kind of intention if you do want this to be something for language learning. At the end, sometimes it might be a case of like, okay, learn some stuff at home and then go. And that will be like the final step. You will go and you'll be able to speak and it will just all click into place. My experience with Spanish was a bit similar to that, but it was 4 years of school study and then only really speaking for exams. I landed in Costa Rica for 3 months. Day one, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, who's this other volunteer? Why can she speak so well? She says she's only learned Spanish for like a year. Like, it's been 4 years for me. What? I've been wasting my time. Like, no, I've just been learning it in very different scenarios. And so then that 3 months of being very intentional, living with a family, living in Spanish, right? That is what then solidified the 4 years of study that came before it. Now, that would be great, right? If we could have 4 years of study and then 3 months like on the ground, intentional immersion for every single language you wanted to learn. Wouldn't that be lovely? But we don't all have that time in
yes.
reality. That's not how it's going to work for everyone all the time. And it doesn't to that shape, right? Language learning is always. But I wonder if when I say those words, intentional immersion, how does that differ from what perhaps you just described in part of the idea of immersion? How does it differ in terms of intentional? We have that word in.
I think it's just giving yourself a big permission slip to explore the language and the culture in different ways, and to widen the net, so to speak, which is a bit what you're always talking about in the newsletter with the playlist, with even just going down language learning rabbit holes and getting lost and saying, hey, this name sounds interesting. Using a TV show to pursue things that are mentioned offhandedly during the TV show. Okay, so this place here, let me look it up in the map. Let's see, let's learn more about it. Let's just enjoy, see it as an exploration. And also cultivating curiosity, saying, I wonder what about the little things, not expecting, because I think the problem with, I have a native friend, for example, which is the other thing that we use a lot. We expect our native friends to know all the small things that we don't know about their language and their culture, but a native is mostly unaware of what it is that you don't understand, because the differences, the inherent differences between your language, their language, your culture, and their culture. These are things that show up by accident, can show up by accident, but you cannot expect your native friends to provide that for you. It's a bit on us, but it also depends on what we want to do with the language we're learning. Because if we just want to have a practical approach to the language, that's perfectly okay. We don't all have to become C2. But if we feel something like a connection to this one language, and we want to nurture that sense because it triggers something, it sparks something in us, then we have to just allow ourselves to do different things, explore, find, I don't know, YouTube channels about topics that are relevant to us, read the comments, read reviews. For me, it drives me crazy, specifically for Italian, that when people that love Italy look at blogs and reviews in English about Italy. No, if you want to start to immerse in the culture of the country, you want to see what do the locals think about this place? What do the locals think about this restaurant? What do the locals think about this B&B? If you're reading tiny little reviews every 4 times a week, let's say, over a long period of time, you are getting insights into the culture. And that's something that is so overlooked. There's such a vault of information in reviews in Google Maps and TripAdvisor.
It's a really good example because it links well with immersion. Like immersion can be anywhere, first of all, especially intentional immersion. You don't have to be in country. You can be absolutely at home in a place that is far away from someone that speaks a language and still intentionally immerse yourself. I do want to have a bit of a focus today, specifically on in country immersion, because that's what we're going to talk about in
Yes.
regards to the retreat. Then you say it's a really great example. The idea of reading TripAdvisor reviews, Google reviews, looking for those in the language, filtering by language is great because if you're planning a trip, or even when you're already on the trip and you're deciding where to eat that night, it's just that little bit extra, isn't it? Rather than looking at what someone has said in English. And sometimes it's hard because they think, especially on Google or whatever, it depends on your phone language. Sometimes they might auto translate to English or to your phone language. So you have to make an intention to change it back, to look for the original and to see it, see original language. It will have it underneath in little grayed out writing. Click, and then you've got some practice. And like you say, it might seem like something really small, but it all adds up. The other day, I said something to someone, I don't know, in a boat or something, and the boat driver was like, "Oh, you speak some Malay?" And I was like, "Yeah, a little bit." I was like, "I speak Indonesian, so sometimes I make mistakes in Malay." Blah, blah, blah. Very, very similar languages. He said this like, it was almost like a proverb, the way he said it, and then he translated it for me. It was basically, one grain of sand on top of another makes a beach or something along those lines. It was something like that. And so it isn't just about that big, full experience of like, I will go to Italy or to Malaysia or to Spain or wherever for 3 months, 3 weeks, 3 years, and then boom, I'll be fluent. It is just sometimes noticing those small moments of intentionality, those small little wins that you get throughout the whole experience that are going to add up to the whole thing being something great at the end.
I mean, it
It's
has so
lovely.
much more meaning. First of all, because as language learners, it's a very important.
Yeah.
But it has more meaning because, and it came out of something like it came from you saying only a little. So
Yeah,
people
yeah.
think they have to have an incredible level of knowledge of the language to have a good conversation with a native, when instead, even just showing your willingness, your interest, your presence, you sparked an observation that I don't know.
Do you think that you have to be a certain level before you can be intentional with your immersion?
No, no, you can start tomorrow if you are, just starting the language. Absolutely not. We have to, again, another permission slip here, because I see this in myself as well. I'll wait till I am. And that's something we've been conditioned to believe. But we don't have to understand every single thing. Just letting the language wash over us, not because we're going to do passive learning. No,
Mm.
just for the pleasure of hearing the sound, and maybe I'll catch one word, and that's good. I didn't catch all the others. Well, let's focus on that word I did catch, but it's not really important. It's also getting to expose my ear to the sounds, to the musicality of the language. We don't talk about this enough, and it's not the topic today, but the sound, the musicality of a language, the sooner we expose ourselves to it, the more we're helping our ear and also our pronunciation, and we also enriching ourselves. Well, I have a musical background, but that doesn't mean I do think that we shouldn't wait to do listening exercise and pronunciation exercise. If we can start today by just letting our meditation wash over us and just taking, because when we communicate, this is a mistake I make continuously. We forget that it's not the vocab, it's not the grammar. We communicate through gestuality, we communicate through tone of voice. We also communicate, and this is a beautiful idea, through our energy, through our personal energy. And so if we remember that we are communicating at other four levels, this is a very empowering thing to bear in mind because it means that we can do a lot with very little.
The other thing about that is that when you have less words, when you have less vocab or less grammar to use, the other thing you become more dependent on. So, like you say, I love this idea of your energy. Like that is so true. You can just sense if you walk into a shop and someone's serving you, and you can sense if they feel a bit angry. You can sense if they feel really happy and they might want to chat a bit more. Do you know, you just sense it. You're right. Energy is a good word for that. Energy and all the gesture, all of that stuff becomes slightly more amplified if the words that you have are a little bit less. It's not that you are, it's how effectively can I communicate. And so if you can communicate effectively, even if there's a handful of words, but you're getting the things that you want and need because of everything else that is compensating for that, then, that is a smile. God, a smile goes such a long way.
Smile. Oh,
Yeah, to just approach a situation, right? And be able to ask a taxi driver how much the ride is in their language. You're less likely to get the full rip-off price
yeah.
if you just have a nice smile and you're able to say, "How much is it in the language?" "Oh, you speak my language? Ah, well, for you, it's this much." And of course, it's not just about getting the taxi rides, like there's taxi discounts. That's not why we learn languages. That's not the only reason, but a nice side effect, bonus.
Well, we also have to stay practical.
Right, yeah, there needs to be a practical reason as well as an emotional one to learn a language, right?
But I don't know. I think it gives me a bounce in the step when somebody says something little. It's not a big. Just a small appreciation of what you're doing, of your journey.
Yeah, and because it's those little boosts that then make you wanna try again, right? So, like, sometimes it's almost adjusting our expectations of, like, I'm gonna go into this restaurant and I'm gonna order completely fluently with 0 English, with all the perfect words and perfect pronunciation, and if we actually lower our expectation to, "I'm gonna get the meal I want, any means possible," we can then use the gesture and the energy a little bit more. We're not relying too much on words, the pressure is off, but we're still gonna get the same outcome. We're just taking off that pressure of, like, how we get there, which is the assumption of language, and then gradually we can think about add the intention there would be, like, I'm now being intentional with wanting to, maybe there's, like, a very colloquial way to say, "I want," or "I would like," so you can use that, the next time that you go in, that sort of thing. So just increasing it rather than going straight to level 10 and then
Yeah,
feeling
which is
disappointed when it doesn't happen.
yes. May I just add for
Mm.
people who are listening that you don't have to do all this overnight. I mean, you're hearing this tomorrow. Don't expect to be able to do these things. It's a journey. It's don't be
Mhm.
perfectionistic also in this. Just start, entertain the idea, and you gradually you get there because it takes time. We've been educated differently, and it takes time to unlearn some mental patterns, and that's okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Intentional immersion, one way to get would be with a retreat. Yeah, here's the answer. So you offer retreats for Italian learners who get the chance to come to Italy to stay in a really cool sounding location, right? Are they all in the same location?
Yes, yeah, I hosted one also in the town where I'm living now. I usually host them in my hometown, Gaeta. It's in region Lazio. It's between Rome and Naples. But the point is not that it's my hometown. The point is that it's a small town.
Mm.
And that's another thing to take into consideration when we travel. The idea of not having expectations for the big tourist spot and to hope for more meaningful connections in a small town. And
Absolutely. I think this is something that's really cool about retreats versus like finding a language school abroad, because language schools typically have to be in a big city or a big hub because that's where they're going to get the most people able to come in. You know, they're running on quantity of students, right? And yeah, that means that when you're in your classes at, say, a language school in Rome, you're surrounded by Italian, and then you're probably going to go back to your accommodation that night and be like, whew, that was a lot of Italian. I want to just chill and watch Netflix for a bit now. I want to
yeah,
FaceTime home. Right? Like you then need that break. Whereas something like a retreat, especially like being in that small town, it's cozier. It's a smaller number of people really having a chance to engage without the overwhelming "Phew," at the end of the day, in my opinion.
there's also the performance aspect of in a
Yeah.
classroom, yes, and that
Yeah.
brings up so much baggage that we all tend to have. It's also the idea, I think when I created the retreat, I want to saw it as people taking time to focus on language, but also on themselves and just slowing down and having meaningful moments with the language, with other language learners, with the community. Because when you're in a small town, the community naturally wants to connect with you because the smaller communities are a bit nosy
Yeah.
and a bit want to
No one
and
cares in the city.
in a
Yeah.
nice way. And I know I also created pockets of time, breaks within the day, because, for example, all that language learning can, all that language interaction can be a bit. The brain knows what it's doing, but you also need to know that your brain needs to rest a bit.
Mm.
Think also the idea of classroom time. It can be, there's a time and a place for that as well. But the language you touch upon when you're living the everyday situations with other people throughout a day is going to be at a different level. When you're going to the classroom, stuff is happening in the classroom. You'll be taking the bus, you'll be taking the subway, but then you're left to your own devices. Instead, here, the town is your classroom. Every moment of the day is a classroom in a good way. And you just get to also notice the language nuances that you would only catch in that situation. And so,
You mentioned everyday situations. So I'm assuming it isn't classroom time 24/7. What kind of things happen? What do you do on the
well, it's as simple as, having breakfast together, having coffee together, or saying pass the salt. How do you say pass the salt in Italian when you've done loads of lessons in which you talked about climate change? You've talked about lots of topics, but the small stuff, you never, never get to live the get them to support each other because I think that's really important. The relief to see that you're not alone and that no matter what your level of Italian is, you have something to contribute to the group, to the community, to me, because I'm learning as well from my students. Then we go to the market and we look at the produce because Italy works by seasons. We eat by the season. So all the veggies that you see, the fruit you see, looking at the pricing, the names, and the experience, because a market in Italy is a social experience. So you get to see people for when they're really connecting. And then activities like giving a shopping list to my students and saying, okay, so you have to buy the ingredients for today's lunch, and sending them to specific town. This activity, I really love it because it should take, if I went to do the shopping, it would take me 20 minutes. Students get so excited because then the people in the shops that I send them to start weighing in, saying, well, you're getting bread, but what are you going to eat? Because maybe you don't want this kind of bread. Maybe you want this other kind of bread. People weighing in with unsolicited advice, and so something that's supposed to take them 20 minutes usually ends up taking them 2 hours because they get lost in
Mm.
this sense of connection, looking around, taking everything in, and they get excited. And so we end up having lunch very late, but the students always come back very gratified. And, small activities like that, but also slowing down as people, not only as language learners, to look around, because we tend, I do it too, to want to check things off a list when we travel. No, I'm going to see this, I'm going to see that. But is this and that what appeals to you first and
Mhm.
foremost? And sometimes, if we just see one thing less and look around more, we'll be taking in quite a bit of those cultural nuances that can help enrich our language growth. And we can eavesdrop. I do some eavesdrop. I hope that nobody finds this, but I do some eavesdropping exercises, and they. I love eavesdropping when I'm learning a language, and it's fun. You see these people, they're taking notes, walking around people and just taking notes of what they hear. And you wouldn't believe that the language that we discover and that comes out, and it feels so gratifying because you've sort of hunted it. You
Mhm.
didn't just fall in your lap. For me, this is fun because
I love the eavesdropping idea. Like, I'm very much, if I'm at home and well, actually, even like I'm recording this now in Singapore, right? So there's 4 official languages, but many more around.
yes,
People are very silent public transport here, so it's not really like you can't be
yeah,
on the metro or anything. Sort of think if I was at home on a train or something, if someone answers the phone and I'm like, oh, that's not English. But yeah, here not on the train so much, but maybe in the street you sort of catch glimpses and oh, some Mandarin there, some Tamil there. That's Malay. It's really, really cool. So yeah, I love the idea of that. It's such a cool skill to learn in such a fun way while you're in Italy.
yes,
Great idea.
it's because language has so many layers, and you just have to embrace all those layers and see what becomes more nuance in your head. Of course, these are the ideas that you can adapt for whatever language you're learning, but you
Mm.
have to also take into consideration the culture, because if you're where people are soft spoken, which is not the case in southern Italy, it might be a bit harder.
Everyone's on
So,
their phone on the metro here. That's the silent. Like everyone's looking down on the phone. You went to a hawker center here, you'd be surrounded by conversations. So there are other places. There are other places where you'll find it. But yeah, compared to maybe somewhere like in India, for example, a bus is very loud. Not necessarily with people, with a lot of horns, a lot of like music being played. So then you might find things, hear conversations and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. Adapt and tweak, and it will work for any language. I like that advice. And so you've got a few coming retreats, right? How you sort of 1, 2, or 3 a year usually?
this year I'm starting one for beginners.
Mm.
And I'm really excited at the idea because I like the idea of adapting those same activities for beginner and just learning, acquiring vocab from things that you're actually seeing and interacting with. I can just see the market activity. It offers so much potential. There's something, I don't know, very exciting for me about markets because there's colors, there's bustle, there's sounds, there's smells, and the more multisensorial. the more we can engage all our senses in our journey, language journey, the better it is, the more rewarding and enriching, and it sticks. Stuff sticks when you engage all your senses. You remember things. And I also have one for people who are able to have conversations in Italian, and it's at the end of September. And it's a way of connecting with language, culture, and also feeling less alone, because there's something, I don't know about you, but I feel the need to see people in person. I'm grateful for all the online world has to offer, but when you see other people like yourself, like-minded people, and get to connect in person over your passions, your things, it feels, yes, it's real. I'm doing this.
Um,
And it's extremely rewarding. And it brings about change. It's not something that lasts only for the time of the retreat, because it sparks something in you. For example, I also have a art therapy class. Basically, I meet with a therapist who actually does art therapy, and we draw the landscape with the watercolors for 2 hours with soothing music in the background. And this is a beautiful experience at many levels. First of all, because we're engaging with our creative side of the brain in Italian.
this is on the retreat.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. And then again, we're in a small town in the south. So people see you drawing sitting on the
they're
ground,
coming
and
over there. Yeah.
they're going to come on over and say, "Oh, you're learning Italian. Well, I can help." And stuff like that
Yeah.
happens. But also the thing that you say, okay, I don't know how to draw. The teacher is very good. You find out that you can actually do some squiggles and have a souvenir of that afternoon. And I had a student that went on and decided that when she got back to England, she was taking art classes. And icing on the cake, me a Christmas postcard that she had
Oh,
done. And I was like, wow. So see, it doesn't last those days. It sparks gentle change in other areas of your life, and you've discovered sides of yourself that maybe you weren't aware of.
I love that. When you say there's one for beginners now,
Mhm. Yes. We have to talk
so
about it in some other setting.
yeah,
When I say beginners, I mean people who, let's say you've learned Spanish and you've said, okay, you know what, I'm going to dabble in Italian a bit because they are similar. I know something. And then what happens is, if you know you're going on a retreat, what it is, if you feel this excitement and you start saying, okay, for the reason I have to study more and I'll prepare for it. And so you generally reach a higher level within the time of the retreat. That is what my students always do. No matter what the level is, they decide, oh, I have to study and prepare for the retreat. So you have to be a solid A1 and done a bit of dabbling the Italian before the event takes place.
and then for the other retreat, you say conversational, right?
Yes, 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 yes.
Again.
And it's for intermediate learners. I try to speak to all the participants because many people think don't have the right level,
Mm,
and I have to check and see if it's true. Most of the times, it's not true.
mm, mm,
It's people underestimating their level,
yeah.
and yeah,
It's good to get that clarified that it's not necessarily attached. Like you sort of said, you're probably like A1, but it's not like you must be A1. You must
no,
self-assess. I like that.
yes, but also a sense of language adventure.
Mm,
I think is really the requisite,
mm.
let's say, for the retreat. This thing of, I'll try this. Have a sense of, well, I'm going to try this. I'm going to be in a place where I'll be supported and welcoming environment. And I want to do this, in that sense.
Also, I think touched on, go abroad for a language class. Like if you're a beginner and you're sort of thinking, do I go class, do I go retreat? A retreat does take that pressure off because it's like, am I going to be sat in the class and is everyone else going to be better than me? And then I have to suddenly speak and I've heard the previous row of 10 and I've gone, "Could you do that?" In a retreat, it's like that's that smaller, cozier group. Like there is no shame. You're going to be making lasting friendships, I imagine.
Absolutely. I think the thing of being in a small group allows me to be there for everybody and adapt and tweak according to needs. If you're more an introvert or you're feeling a bit overwhelmed, I plan around that. It allows for major flexibility. And also, I give instructions on how to handle it, like create little, small things to make things easier. And we use the word mindful a lot, but I actually make my retreats as
You actually mean
uh,
it.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, because there's no point. This is a treat you're giving yourself. You're treating yourself to something. You're giving yourself a gift. You're not joining a marathon. It's a gentle prompt in a new direction.
Mm.
And we have to have the curiosity to say, okay, and let's see where this takes me and feel empowered. In a supportive community where people think it's really exciting that you're there to learn Italian because,
Mm.
Most Italians are very surprised. And yes, so
Nice. And a couple of practicalities. Are they always the same length of time? Is it like 5 days?
This year I'm doing it this way. I'm toying with the idea of making a shorter experience
Mm.
after I see how this year goes.
Mm.
5 days,
five
six
days.
nights and 5 days. Yes,
Five
yes.
days. Okay. So I guess as well, the cool thing about that is you could always plan, especially if someone's coming from further afield, if someone's coming from like the US, for example, 5 days, you've barely gotten over the jet lag. You could always plan to have a couple of days, either, let's say, land in Rome, or even if you were to fly into like somewhere else in Europe, like, into Europe, flights and transport is sometimes relatively cheap and frequent. And so you could land a couple of days, chilling in a new city, get
Yes.
yourself to Rome, and then get yourself, I guess from Rome, it's easy to travel there, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
it's
Or
very
to get yourself to Rome or Naples, get to the venue, have the retreat, and then maybe even plan for a few days at the end as like a buffer of like
yes. Yes.
using everything that you've just learned on your own, have those few days in Rome or Naples or somewhere else in Italy and then back.
Yes, yes, that is really advisable. And I like to think also that the retreat is also gives you the tools to then be able to pursue your travels on your own, not only linguistically, but also, culturally, know what to look for, where to find the people, the clock of the town, so that when you travel on your own, then you have those tools for yourself in the future. I mean,
Like if you've gone around the supermarket and someone has come to you and said, "Oh, what do you want the bread for?" So you've then gone back and had that month's retreat. And then a couple of days later, you're getting a bit peckish. You're thinking, I know exactly what I've got a craving for right now. I know exactly what I want, and it will remind you again. And so you've got that extra chance to just solidify everything before rushing back to regular life.
Yes, definitely. And also, yes, yeah, that's also to plan around and just build a little buffer either before, ideally, and also something after, and just make it, yeah, your little adventure and exploration. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
exactly what.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's such a cool thing. So thank you, first of all, for what you do and for offering it to the world. If people are interested and they want to sign up, what does that process look like? What website should they go to?
They can come to All About Italian. There's a page dedicated to retreats, and they sign up for the waiting list. And shortly after 1, 2 days, I send the brochures, and they can get all the information, the details, and set up a quick informal chat. It's not an assessment level; it's a chat you
Mhm.
to get to know each other better and see if we are a good fit, and then get complete the registration process.
We go back to the very beginning. When you say people can go to All About Italian, is that on Instagram or is that
No, it's my website,
right?
allaboutitalian.com,
.com. Okay.
and
Allaboutitalian.com.
allaboutitalian.com. There's a retreat
Details there.
page, and there's the sign up form for the waiting list for the retreat.
Cool.
And they can get the materials, look at the brochure, take their time to decide if the timing's right, if they feel it's the right moment, and then get in touch with me. I also help participants plan around the retreat. So if they want suggestions on destinations in the area, or how to balance the whole trip and quick tips. I'm there to help as well.
It's a
And
great area as well. I had no idea. I knew the names of Italy, and I always knew that there were so many sort of famous city names, but geographically, I didn't know what was where. So I had no idea that Naples and Pompeii were so close. And then the Amalfi Coast, it was like, whoa, all of that, I can fly to Naples and then came
oh
to
yeah,
Rome. It was like amazing. It's such a cool area. There's so much to see.
Italian trains help
Oh,
these trips really easy. I mean,
yeah.
it's because they're all very well connected. So absolutely, just takes a bit of awareness and knowing that everything is there. But
Yeah.
absolutely, no, I
Yeah.
didn't remember that you had been to Naples. I
Oh,
follow your
cool.
adventures.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, it was great. Really, really cool. I liked it. Like I've been to Italy before, but never there, never that part. It was nice to see.
Nice, nice, nice.
Mm.
It's an incredible
Mm.
area. Absolutely
Mm.
incredible area. So definitely made a great.
Well, Alfred, thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. It's been really, really fun. Do you have any final
Merci,
words?
thanks. It was such fun to be here to chat.
Any final words? Anything on intentional immersion, retreat, anything that we've missed that you want to cover before we wrap up?
Yeah.
Go on.
Well, just one thing. There's this Italian word, assaporare, that means to savor food, to savor food. And but I think it applies to everything. Just to assaporare your language journey. Don't treat it like a visit to the dentist. Treat it like something that
Mm,
you want to sink your teeth in and enjoy and just
yeah.
let it stay with you a bit as long as possible. From the word sapore, that means taste, instead assaporare means to take the taste in.
Mm.
And yes,
I
and
love
just
that.
savor
That's a
this.
good word for life in general, how we should live life.
Yes,
Take it all in.
yes,
Yeah. And it fits as well. I know you mentioned earlier, like visiting and the like checklist. Thinking, what do I actually want to see? Rather than what does TripAdvisor say I should see? You know, going to one of those places, right?
yes,
Taking it
assaporando
all
the
in.
place
Yeah.
and listening to ourselves more. I think that's what assaporare also is all about. So that's my closing words.
What great closing words. Thank you very much. I will be assaporando the rest of my day, as I hope you will
Okay.
too. I will speak to you very soon, I'm sure. Thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure. If you are listening to this or watching this and you want to have a little look and check out Elfin's retreats, definitely go allaboutitalian.com and take a peek. Elfin, thank you.
Everybody. Bye.
Ciao.